right, Senator, thank you for being here. I know it's been toward the end of a very long day for you, but this has been a very sort of interesting news day for everybody watching on the internet and everybody at home with everything that happened out of the White House today.
Yeah.
And you come at it from a different perspective, having been the U.S. Attorney here in Mobile, having been the Attorney General of the state of Alabama. How do you regard what you heard today?
Well, the president is very aggressive about using executive orders, and I think he's abused that power. Some of these things probably he can do legitimately and should do. Some of them may be questionable. I haven't had a chance to study it. But, you know, my experience, Bob, as a federal prosecutor, we've, I think, led the nation in prosecutions of criminals with guns. There are mandatory federal penalties if you carry a gun, even in a drug offense, 5 years without parole added to whatever other sentence you get. And it's helped drive down the use of criminals using guns, and it's brought down the murder rate. You know, our murder rate today is half what it was in 1980. And so some of this has been smarter law enforcement, tougher law enforcement. And I did check the U.S. Attorney statistics. Mobile, our district here now, is still, I think, #1 in the nation in a per capita prosecution of gun crimes, and we had that kind of record. But the Obama administration's prosecutions are down from Bush administration prosecution. So I guess all I'm saying is, how do you reduce gun violence in America? The most effective way, I believe, day after day, murder after murder, is focus on dangerous criminals and making sure that they are intimidated wherever possible from carrying guns, because once they get in a fuss and they got a gun in their pocket, somebody's liable to be dead.
Was there anything in what the president said today that you could support?
Well, we'll see. I mean, he's got the kind of background checks. It may be improved. I think that's got some potential. I really do think we need to look at this question of mental illness. Really. I've seen that in criminal prosecutions of all kinds. A certain number of the people that get in trouble with the law really have serious mental problems.
But then
and so that can be focused on.
It comes down to who funds that. Because very often it's an unfunded mandate that comes down. It
is, and it's expensive just to provide treatment for everybody who has mental illness in an unlimited way. And a lot of our treatments, they're much better than they were 30 years ago. Psychiatric treatment today is more effective than it used to be. But even then, sometimes it's very hard to know how to help a person who's got a serious mental illness. So I do think that's got potential.
Now, Marco Rubio came out and said that nothing that the president said today would have prevented what happened in Connecticut.
That's my understanding, Mom. None of the proposals laid out would have changed that. And so we've got to be smart about how we confront crime, murders, violence. I do think we need to ask ourselves, let's say you have somebody that's got pent-up anger, deep-seated anger problems, and they play these video games that are so violent and so vicious, using guns to slaughter people and all of that. Does that have the potential to tip people off to create these mass shootings?
Right. The president kind of gave that a pass today. He didn't really bring that up.
Well, he should. Of course, you know, Hollywood thinks that they have a constitutional right to do all this. Well, the gun owners believe they have a constitutional right to bear arms, and they do. So I think it's perfectly legitimate to focus on media violence, video game violence, as one of the things that we should look at. The failure to do that would be an oversight, I think.
What about the ban on assault weapons that the president brought up?
I've not supported the banning of assault weapons. The assault weapon is not the military weapon. The military weapon is a fully automatic. It qualifies as a machine gun. It's been illegal for many years. It has a very severe penalty. If you carry an automatic weapon, fully automatic weapon in a crime, during a crime, it's 30 years without parole in addition to everything else. And I think the word's gotten out. Criminals are not using machine guns anymore. But the assault weapons that we see today are semi-automatic rifles configured to look like a military weapon, but they're not the same. So most rifles, hunting rifles, and even the revolvers, that 6-shot old Colt revolver, that won the West, those would qualify as semi-automatic weapons. And some of the proposed legislation would have banned 80% of the weapons today that are out there.
Now, do you think any of this has a chance to fly? I know the Judiciary Committee, which you're a part of, is going to hold hearings at the end of this month, from what I understand. How do you think that's going to play?
Well, we'll see. Senator Dianne Feinstein, she's going to be pushing that, and aggressively. Harry Reid has said he'll bring it up and find time for the Senate. He can't find time to pass a budget while we're going broke. We're on the road to California, and California's on the road to Greece. So we can't find time to do that. But he'll bring this up, and we'll have a debate about it, that's for sure. And maybe some improvements can be made. I hope so.
Now, what about the criminal background checks? Very often there are gun shows, and there may be a background check within a gun show, but then there's nothing to stop somebody from coming out and trading a gun with somebody in the parking lot outside there.
Yes, and that's been a practical problem. Like, do you have to have a background check to give your father's gun to your brother? Right. So we've not done that, and it's pretty impractical to do that. It'd be a major federal regulation on, I know people in cities that don't hunt and all have no idea how guns are moved about, but they have serial numbers on them. They can be traced to a degree, and I think I don't think we need to go too far there, but you can perhaps improve that system. I think there might be some computer upgrades that could make that system work better, and to identify people who have mental illness could be picked up more effectively.
Because I talked to some people in law enforcement who said their biggest fear is the lone wolf, the person who is a psychopath, who is mentally deranged, who doesn't consult with anybody else before he or she goes out and does this kind of thing. And how would any of what you heard today keep the guns out of the hands of that kind of person? It seems like it would be very difficult.
Well, that's the point. The point is that people, what's in their heart and their minds and hatreds drive people to do these things, and you just can't keep people from committing violent crimes. They never have in the history of the world, and we won't now. So we've got to be realistic about how you can effectively do that. And there's a great tradition in this country of private gun ownership. The Constitution has been interpreted to be a personal guarantee right to you to have arms. And a semi-automatic rifle, if you ban that, you've really gone pretty far. We ban machine guns, we ban hand grenades, we ban a lot of powerful weapons. But when you take the semi-automatic rifle or pistol and start banning that, and I think that goes to the core of what private ownership means.
Right. We had asked some viewers and readers on our website to contribute questions, and most of them centered around what is the senator's position on the Second Amendment about keeping the firearms that we personally have, that you would support the Second Amendment the way it's written right now.
I absolutely do, and I was very troubled in the last two Supreme Court nominees that indicated that they thought that it was not a personal right, and actually Sotomayor voted that it was not when she got on the court, although testified almost to the contrary in the committee. So, but the Supreme Court historically has stood by the view that this is plainly in the Constitution. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
That's right.
And so we've already infringed quite a bit on it, so I don't think so. No, sir. And I think a semi-automatic weapon, even if it's configured as a military weapon, looks like one. I don't think at this point that should be banned. We'll see what kind of evidence they can brought out, but I don't expect to be for that. I do believe that aggressive law enforcement of criminals and people with violent tendencies and have been convicted, or if they're convicted, they can't possess a gun. Convicted of a
legally,
felony.
right.
Right. So, but the question is, do you prosecute? And so the Obama administration has allowed prosecutions to decline on those cases from what they were in the Bush administration, yet they're the first ones to go out and demand more laws on innocent people, really, that impact, burden, and raise costs for innocent people who are law-abiding, and they need to be focusing more on this criminal element, in my opinion.
Let's talk about Jack Lew for a second. Last week when we talked, you said he didn't tell the truth to you when he was testifying in the committee. Have you heard anything new that would change your position about him?
No, I haven't, and I'm waiting, but I gave him a chance at the hearing. I read his statement to him and said, you said this to the American people, is it accurate? And he said it was. When he said that the budget would pay down the debt and have us live within our means, and that was totally bogus. This budget was a disaster. It added $13 trillion to the debt, as his own numbers showed. So I'm tired of it, Bob. I'm just telling you. When a person comes before an august Senate committee, is director of the Office of Management and Budget, and can't tell the American people that his budget comes not close to balancing, never pays down any debt, and says the opposite, I don't think he ought to be elevated to the #1 financial position in our nation.
Do you think he's going to be confirmed?
Well, we'll see. I think that this matter could grow some. I don't think a lot of our members of the Senate fully realize the dramatic nature of him producing a budget that did nothing to fix our debt or deficits, and then went out and said it did. I think we need to start holding people to account for it. We're in a world where people think they can just say anything, you know? And nobody will ever hold him to account. I may not succeed, but more people in this country are going to know what he said about that budget as time goes by.
You know, talking about budgets, I think we're talking about such enormous numbers, and we're talking about terms that people may not have a handle on, national debt versus budget deficit. You know, how can you tell people at home, you know, what they could expect, or what do you see happening with a new budget or a budget that gets proposed, period?
Well, the danger is that we'll go now with 1,360 some odd days without a budget in the Senate. The House has passed the budget. The Republican House did. And President Obama attacked them because they actually reduced spending. Oh, this is horrible. While they wouldn't produce anything. And so I guess I was disappointed today to hear that the new chairman of the Budget Committee, Senator Patty Murray from Washington, has said, well, they probably won't have a budget this year.
And you talked in the Wall Street Journal last month about everything being done in secret.
Bob, this is where things are going. We're all 100 of us in the Senate, supposed to be equal, but 1 or 2 senators meet in secret with the vice president or the secretary of treasurer, OMB, Jack Lew, and then they reach a deal on the 11th hour, 59th minute, drop it down. If you don't pass this bill tonight, the country is going to sink into the ocean. And like lemmings, senators and congressmen are going out and voting for these things, and we've got to start saying no.
It's kind of like the health care bill in a way.
It is. That was done that way. The last Budget Control Act agreement 17 months ago was done that way, and it's not healthy. The American people should start demanding that we conduct our business in public. Let me ask you. Would this TV station complain if you found out that the school board or the county commission met in secret to discuss county business?
Absolutely. Open meeting laws, right.
I told the New York Times person that, you know, I said, my local people would complain that the school board did this. Why didn't the New York Times and the Washington Post, why aren't you guys complaining about these people meeting in secret?
Why do you think they don't complain?
Because they're used to it. They think that's business. They think that the Senate probably can't function, and this is the way smart people, clever people do things. And they drop them a few crumbs that they get to put in the paper and keep them happy, you know? Maybe I'm too hard on them, but I think they should be. I think good government people like the great newspapers and media outlets in Washington ought to criticize the secrecy that's going on.
Speaking of the assault weapon ban, the proposed ban, the budget problems, do you want to run again?
Yeah, well, I feel good. I feel like maybe I can contribute And so somebody asked me today about it, and I said, Lord willing, I felt like I would run again. It's several years away, but so
I'm thinking, like, it sounds like it's such an enormous headache, and you've served your time. Certainly, it's like, why wouldn't you want to just say, okay, let's let somebody else try this?
well, you know, you wonder about that. I don't have to have the job. It's not something I have to have, but I'm at a position where we've been able to do some things for Alabama that might not otherwise be the case. I'm third ranking on the Armed Services Committee, and I care about those issues, and I'm worried about where we stand with the Defense Department and funding for it. And so and of course involved in the budget process. Somehow, some way, we've got to have a breakthrough there and get this country to pass a long-term financial plan that'll put us on the right path. We'll be surprised how much economic benefit we'll get from the whole world saying, oh, wow, the United States has finally got their act together. This is a much better situation than it was a few years ago.
But in the meantime, some people are hurting because of the 2% increase or reinstatement of the Social Security tax.
There was a holiday that to try to stimulate the economy. And so people didn't pay their Social Security, full Social Security tax to save 2% on that. But that was never to be permanent, and that did end. And the people are feeling it. And they would have felt a lot more, Bob, if the whole income tax system had gone up too.
Which it did for some, very few.
Yes, the upper, only a few at the upper income. So I felt like one of the frustrations I think a lot of people have is that the tax rate, okay, it didn't go up but on about 1% of the people. Everybody else kept the current rate. But they were put in a position where you can't have the sufficient money to carry out the government's business, and you can't cut spending. And so people are saying, well, if you don't have enough money, why don't you cut spending now? You raise taxes. And the answer to that is that the president is resisting cutting spending. So you've got the debt ceiling coming up. We've borrowed already. We've hit that ceiling again, blown through $2.1 trillion in increased debt ceiling. It's already been reached again in 17 months. And we've got to say to the government and the president, okay, if we raise that debt ceiling, what are you going to do to help get your credit card balance down in the future? Even if it takes 10 years, we want to see a 10-year plan that'll put you on a path to get on a sound footing, not continue this reckless spending. And that's what the president's saying he won't do. He just flat out said that he doesn't want to negotiate on the debt ceiling. But it was done 18 months ago. We reduced spending in over 10 years in exchange for an immediate raising of the debt limit, the credit card limit. I really think this is important. There are several other things that are coming up within weeks, too, that provide the Republicans, the conservatives, an opportunity to say, let's see a plan to contain spending now. You've got tax increases. Let's see some spending reductions.
Senator, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Good.
Thank you, everybody, for watching.